Welcome back to the Ink Sync. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
And this is the publishing podcast for the rest of us.
I'm kidding. I want to introduce myself like that.
You should.
I'm actually just a jester.
For context, I do have transcriptions of our shows. We don't have anywhere to put them right now because we just don't have a website yet, but we will one day. And I've been sending Kaylee snapshots because the translation program just refuses to understand that her name is Kaylee. It is never once
It hasn't even kind of zeroed in on any approximation of it.
0 Kayleys have appeared in any of these transcriptions. You've been Caleb, you've been Kidding, you've been Kyle.
I'm kind of a joke, so that's fair.
You're just a lot of things that's other great. Than yourself.
You know, today it's fair. I'm kind of not really with it all. So yeah, I watched a apparent cult classic, and it is sure a movie.
We're going to be talking about a much better movie.
Yes.
That's actually a spoiler because you guys won't hear that until another week from now, but it's going to be fun.
Yep. Agreed. We may be doing a disservice to almost every other movie that was made from, because this one is so good.
As a spoiler, we are starting a series on books being adapted into movies and TV shows. We will be starting with Stardust. So tune in next week for that one. We are actually, for a little bit behind the scenes, we record these things in like large batches. We record about 3 episodes worth of content at a time.
We're very chatty.
We're very chatty. We record about 3 hours every time we record, so we don't have to record that often. So if you're ever wondering why I say we haven't recorded in a bit at the beginning of like every episode, it's because we haven't.
we just create the content.
How you doing, Kaylee?
I'm doing great. I watched a weird movie last night, and I'm speaking around it, I guess, but it was Brazil. And I told Annie all about this already, so I'm not going to get into it again, but it slept weird.
Yeah, I could imagine. I've heard of Brazil in passing from people who say that it's like one of the weirdest movies that they've ever seen in their lives, and it seems to be confirmed now for you.
Sometimes you go with the masses.
Yeah.
They were correct on this one. Agreed. How are you, Annie?
I am doing well. School is in full swing. I'm not going to have free time for anything, probably, until January. We have a ton of stuff coming up in January, too, so I'm glad that I'll be off during January. We might take a break for the podcast during January. We haven't decided yet. We will be at 1 year of this podcast in December.
Yeah.
Isn't that insane?
That is crazy. No, I love it.
I do want to say, before we get too far into this podcast, that I do have a couple corrections for our last episode. The last episode that we released was the one on the slow death of local news. Yeah. And I talked about a company called Lion Capital that was pooling resources for small local journalists to have like their HR and IT stuff so that they didn't have to fund that themselves. Except that Lion Capital is not the company that does that. It is called Lion Publishing.
Oh, no.
Lion Capital is a totally different company, and Lion Capital is a public company. Lion Publishing is not, so I was just wrong on 3 different counts on that. Sorry, everybody.
I think the issue is just the sheer volume of material that we review and then refresh ourselves on before the podcast. Like, that's...
And especially in the local news one, there was just a ton of information. It was a lot. So sorry about that. If you decided to look it up and found something entirely different than what I said, it's because what I said was wrong. So it's Lion Publishing, and they are a nonprofit, and you can look them up on Google or wherever. Another thing, I said that a Washington Post article talked about a local election and how the voters were only interested in national politics and only talking about national politics. I don't actually know if that was from the Washington Post. I couldn't for the life of me find that article again. It was in 0 of my sources. I don't know what I was reading from.
I think I actually read that article separately, independently. I will go into my research and dig it out.
I have no idea. I could not find it anywhere, and I got paywalled like 4 times when I kept trying to find it, so I couldn't.
That's the issue. But I
couldn't confirm.
I don't think I have WAPO, so that's the
issue. I don't have WAPO either. I pay for too many other news things.
We've talked about this. That's why we have. Yeah,
it's a problem. If you want to support us in discovering all of the mistakes that we've made, you can through Spotify and Anchor for as little as $1 a month. Help me figure out what that article was from.
And if you don't like giving people money directly, feel free to just sponsor a publishing subscription to Washington Post.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
You can do that. Yeah. You can actually gift subscriptions if you are a Washington Post. Anyway, so I had that. Another thing I want to talk about before we jump in, Kaylee, we had a YouTube comment. Our very first.
Was it me?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
Why? Did you comment on one of ours?
I thought I did. Maybe I just thought about it.
Oh, did you think of commenting about Homestuck?
No.
Have you ever read Homestuck?
No.
Me neither.
I think I know too much about it.
Oh, okay. I had not even heard about it. So someone commented and said that Homestuck is both an epistolary and a serialized work of fiction, and therefore basically just adding to our examples of things that genuinely are serialized works of fiction and how that genre is not dead despite what some
old white guys
with literature degrees think is going on.
So funny. Okay, again, short form fiction, which can be original or fan fiction. It's because it's targeted not for the elevated elite anymore, and those are the ones that are like making these just broad claims, and they have the platform currently, which is so stupid.
Yeah.
But like we all know.
We do, yeah.
We
all like literally everyone experiences, well, maybe not literally everyone, but everyone that I know
so many people
emotionally invested in some work of serialized fiction that is not television, you know? It's, very silly, but yes, the masses agree with us, Kaylee. And by the masses, I mean this one commenter on YouTube.
Well, you know what? All of our respondents, Annie, 100% of our...
Right, exactly. 100% of our sample said yes. We also got, Kaylee, our first dislike on our YouTube channel. If you have discovered our podcast through TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, I do cut up small portions of usually Kaylee Coda because she just has really great points at the end of every episode, and I post them as short videos, and someone really didn't like one of yours. Oh, it was I Live to Spite Ezra Pound. And they were like, no! And hard downright on that one.
Oh, well, you know what? Good.
Yeah.
It's Ezra Pound. It's actually Ezra Pound.
Yeah, you were like, he was a vehement fascist, and he's like, yes, I was, how dare you?
Yeah, how dare you say that like it was a bad thing?
I was very excited. I was like, hell yeah, people hate that shit. You know who else hated that shit? Us.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what's going on. Those are all of our feedback things.
I love it. I didn't notice that somehow, so thank you for sharing that with me.
You didn't know that we had shorts and stuff up?
No, I just didn't know that somebody had commented.
Oh, yeah. I
usually, like, right when you post it, if I see that you've shared something, I'll, like, go and I'll, like, look and I'll listen or whatever, but then, like, I don't come back and check later.
No, I mean, you were there. You don't need to re-listen to it.
You know what? I'd like to listen to your hard work.
Oh, thank you, Kaylee.
Your editing is very good, and like, I've just seen so much, like, growth in general, like, with your familiarity with all of this stuff, and it's very impressive.
Thank you. Now stop breathing into the microphone and we'll move. I actually joined a subreddit for podcasting, so this is a real thing. And they were like, does anyone else like just hyper focus on people breathing into the mics? And they're like, yes! Oh my god! So like, thank God I'm not alone.
Turn into like Darth Vader and cover my mouth.
And a lot of people were like, it doesn't really matter, like breathing is part of talking. It would sound weird if you weren't breathing. And then the people are like, I know that! You think I don't know that? You think I don't know? This is crazy. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Glad everybody knows.
I'll be honest, I would probably be there with you if I were doing the editing, so I'm glad that I'm not, frankly, so.
Good. I'm doing this. I'm protecting you.
Doing the Lord's work, Annie. That's right.
I am. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I think I just hit my thing. All right, Kaylee, let's jump into the news.
There's a lot of it. That's fair. Let's do it.
There is. So I wanted to start us with this very, very funny tweet thread. So if you have existed on the internet over the past couple months, you probably saw the tweet thread of this guy whose name is Paul Ferry. He went through the archives of I believe it was a Canadian newspaper, because he works at a Canadian newspaper. I believe he's an archivist, or if he is not, that is something he does on the side. He found all of these instances of people saying no one wants to work anymore, going back to like the 1860s, thus proving that in fact
we've always been the same.
We've always said this, and in fact I think that this means that we do in fact want to work, because people keep saying anymore. No one wants to work anymore.
And yet people continue to work.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like no one wants to farm anymore. Nobody wants to do. It's like, actually, we still have farmers. So clearly that was not the case, Sir from 1860.
It's so silly and, like, very obviously just people, like,
being old fogies.
Go drink some vinegar.
Go touch some grass.
That's right.
So his latest one, or not his latest one, this was from August 6th, 2022, he decided to round up people saying kids read too much.
That's something that I've heard my family say, for sure.
Kids read too much these days.
It was very impressive just running through this and just how vehemently people don't like thinking.
Yeah, it's hard.
Or reading. It's so silly.
This is a headline from 1901. People are reading too much. President Gilman of Johns Hopkins University tells of the craze to read in the latest book issued. So he wrote this in his book.
Yep.
About how people read too much.
Reading too much. This is the one I want, by the way. I either want this as a tattoo or I want this on, like, a t-shirt or something. But the trouble with you, girly, is you've been reading too many novels. That's in the chain.
Which one is that from?
1932.
It was Famous Last Words. That's fantastic.
Like, what a string of words. I love it so much.
Yeah. One of my favorites was the one from 1921 that says, reading craze may prove harmful to growing children. And these days, I'm sure it's something similar to screen time may prove harmful to growing children.
Absolutely.
Everything may prove harmful to growing children. In fact, life is harmful to growing children. They then grow up and turn into angry people like the rest of us.
Because they think about what's going on.
We're going to link this in the show notes. This was probably one of my favorite things. I do try to start our things out with some fun stuff. So the next time someone tells you that you read too much, inform them that they are part of a proud tradition of grumpy, angry people saying that everyone reads too much.
Godspeed.
Moving on, you, Kaylee, have not really been on discourse Twitter. Because you don't like Twitter, and you don't really deal with controversies, so I'm going to explain this to you.
I pretty much, if I don't like something, I'm very upfront about it, and then I block it. I'm like, nope, you're wrong, bye. Click.
So there has been a trend on Twitter and other platforms of people saying that, well, number one, that white men aren't getting any publishing deals at all, and that's very sad. And number two, that there has been some great stuff published by white men in history. And number three, that because of those previous two things, and also because of the political nature of the world today, those challenging texts, such as Lolita, you can sigh into the microphone, that's fine, would never be published today. So this is a Substack called Countercraft, written by Lincoln Michael, who does some really great commentary on the publishing industry. And I'm going to read the headline, and then Kaylee's going to take us through some of what this says. And it says, why do people think scandalous novels couldn't be published today? Subhead, Lolita, American Psycho, The Satanic Verses, and the State of Shocking Literature. So what's going on here, Kaylee?
So it's an interesting, like, approach to this, like, topic, because it is certainly, it's about shocking literature, scandalous literature, literature that pushes the boundaries or whatever. We have that today. We sure do. We're literally having ongoing topics right now about book banning and why, so let's just be clear. You're wrong. And if this were a Twitter thread that I had stumbled across or if this were a discussion on Tumblr and people were, like, posing these things, I would be like, well, you're wrong. Here's generally places you can go to learn more about why you're wrong, but I don't have any responsibility to educate you as a person by, and then I would block them. Yeah. But since it's our podcast, and there are people in the world that are having this discussion, and we're talking about publishing. Yeah. That's just the idea, is that there's, like, the Salman Rushdie stuff that's recently happened, the overall, like, approach to, like, these seminal classics that were so shocking at the time, and like, they would never have been published today. Like, they weren't published, like, at the time. Like, they were banned. Like, books that are currently today being banned right now. Right. This is the same thing that was happening back when these books were published.
Right.
Like,
they were controversial at the time. Lolita was controversial at the time.
It was banned. They couldn't get it published in America. Right. It had to get published in France, immediately banned, and then because it was sensationalized, right, that's when it was picked up. Right. I mean, if it starts the topic of pedophilia and grooming and why this is bad and like ways to recognize.
I do appreciate the discourse that it has started, and same thing with Satanic Verses. Sure. I appreciate the discourse that was started. I don't remember American Psycho. I am not enough familiar with the discourse around American Psycho to say whether or not it's been beneficial, but I do appreciate that these things existed. What?
White whiny man things.
Is that what American Psycho is about?
I mean, you can boil it down. Sorry.
Good. Perfect.
Like, there's such, I think, one of my favorite theories about that whole thing is that it's just in his head.
Oh, okay.
The whole time.
I'm familiar sort of with the movie. Like, I know that there's like a delusional, hallucinogenic aspect to it, but I've never seen it. I've seen like the clips of Christian Bale being utterly insane, which are lovely, gorgeous, but I understand the impulse to say that we are in a really weird moment right now.
Cancel culture or whatever.
Yeah, that cancel culture exists, and yeah, it absolutely does.
It's always existed. It's just been called different things.
Absolutely. I think that that's probably the main point that we want to bring out, but also that there has always been a counterculture to that. Mm-hmm. There has always been something like right now we have Skyhorse, which is publishing
We've talked about several times.
A lot of controversial, usually biographies and memoirs, and to great acclaim. Those biographies and memoirs are making the bestseller list. I don't think that you can say that controversial books aren't getting published today. I think there's... I say this all the time to the point where I think that maybe other people are just actually not using logic, but the logic doesn't hold up here. Mm-hmm. You can't say that controversial novels aren't getting published. You can't say that controversial memoirs aren't getting published. That's literally incorrect.
Flagrantly. Like, you can just look into the actual things being published this year.
So this Substack kind of goes through basically saying what we're saying. That, the logic here doesn't hold up. Sorry, this is just not the case. When we see TikToks and Twitter accounts saying that, like, white men are being discriminated against, that there's no evidence behind it. It's never with evidence. They always just speak anecdotally, which is, fine, but also not how you make a convincing or scientifically backed argument.
Well, no, I mean, it makes sense just because, like, the political landscape right now is based off of feelings rather than facts.
And I will say, like, we're guilty of this as well. Like, we say, oh, right now things suck. Honestly, things have probably always sucked. Politics has probably always been based on feelings, and it sucks always. Mm-hmm. Like, it's probably genuinely horrible, but I think you're right that it's getting a lot of attention right now because of the political climate. Absolutely.
I think it's kind of like the idea that we were talking about separately, about like just being more aware of something that's always been around as opposed to it being a new thing.
Yeah.
So for example, like Langston Hughes, his poetry was being banned, but he was able to focus his content into like the stuff that maybe wasn't necessarily as scrutinized as directly, into creating biographies and discussions and essays on civil rights and how you approach history and historical figures and history in motion, etc. I just thought that was a very interesting point.
I will say, I never want to say that we should be encouraging in any way the things that are represented in Lolita. Pedophilia is not great, but I can't bring myself to be mad that Lolita was published or to get mad that it might not be published today. Like, I can't get mad that pedophilia wouldn't be published today, Mm-hmm. It's tough for me.
Although it is, though. I mean, it is. Like, that's one of the things in that article. Yeah. Tampa, there's definitely discussion and discourse on how we approach, of course, and that's speaking of toxic masculinity and men and the ways in which they are vulnerable and the ways in which they're privileged.
Absolutely.
So Tampa is a reverse Lolita, essentially, that was published and has been, again, threatened and is either panned or acclaimed, essentially, but it's a teacher that it preys on an eighth grader. The fact that the teacher is a woman versus a young boy, as opposed to the Lolita, in which it's the other way around, and it's a man. I mean, we see that in, like, we've seen that in the news, like, and people just don't, I think, always give it the weight that it's, potentially
absolutely not
owed, and that these are victims, and I definitely think that the discussion is needed. And if this is how it has to come up, then that's how it has to come up.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, these discussions suck, but they need to happen, and unfortunately, like, this is how they're coming up right now, and we can't get super mad about the fact that people saying,
require emotional investment to pay attention. Sometimes it needs to be framed through the lens of fiction. That's been the case, again, for all time. I mean, that's how we got a lot of engagement during the civil rights movement. It's how we got a lot of engagement during the Civil War. Like, Uncle Tom's Cabin, again, we talked about that before. Like, it was written by a white woman, but that's what really started getting people emotionally invested in abolitionists. So...
Related, The Economist put out a story that was very similar. They were wondering if higher costs would mean that publishers would not focus on controversial books as much anymore, kind of coming at this from the Economist angle. And I feel like at some point someone's going to just accept that we're publishing controversial books, but not today, apparently. Not today.
Well, it's like fascinating because, again, it's up to the publisher. And some publishers say no, and there are specific publishers that are like, well, this is a very specific niche market that I can make money in.
Right, and once again, Skyhorse exists.
There are,
they are publishing physically. They're publishing physical books, so...
I mean, again, and just to circle back, Annie and I aren't necessarily saying we agree with everything that they're publishing, because, again, sometimes the controversial material is material that needs to be published. And sometimes it's material that we may not think should be published. But
we're not the arbiters of what should be published.
It's not, yeah, exactly. And if the popular conception at the times was the only, I don't know, decision on that topic, we would be so much poorer today. Because we've had a lot of times when the majority was just wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, so there were some interesting numbers here from Popular Science, which is not something we get to quote very often.
Right. It's true.
Popular Science is a magazine about popular science. It's lovely. Back in the day, they had magazines where the name just was what they were talking about. And this is by Cara Delgado. And they talked about how many books do you need to read on an e-reader to make up for the environmental cost of the e-reader. So if you are, reading a book, a paperback book that has a specific environmental cost, how much does the e-reader have in relation to that? And I actually laughed a little bit, I have to say, because it had this kind of doom and gloom headline of, you need to read dozens and dozens of books to make your e-reader on par with your books. But here, I'm going to read you this quote. Mike Berners-Lee, a professor of practice in Lancaster University's Environmental Center, wrote in a post for The New Scientist that a reader must go through at least 36 books, paperbacks that could be recycled, before evening out an e-reader's footprint. Kaylee, how many books have you read digitally since you purchased your last e-reader?
More than 36, for sure.
Same. Significantly more than 36. The doom and gloom headline was like, you need to read so many books, and it's like, I have read enough books.
I did it.
My new check. Thank you, Kara. It's fine.
No, I thought that was, it's really funny that we definitely approach this in different ways, because I read this article and I was just so confused by the fact that this is kind of news.
Yeah,
like it's not like the e-reader was like a spontaneously created thing from the gods. Like it's made of electronics and plastic. Of course it has an equally impactful environmental footprint. Like, it didn't just come into being. Of course, plastic's a problem. We've known it's a problem forever. And there's also, we already know that the stuff that goes into electronics is likewise an issue. And, mining practices are a problem, and we're trying to solve it. This is all stuff, how I just didn't understand, how this was strange to anyone. But I was reading through the comments on this article, and I was just fascinated, because what
were people saying? I didn't even look.
Oh, it's just you never read the comments, but I do, because I'm an idiot. Yeah, you have to manufacture e-readers and stuff.
What?
You have to manufacture.
They don't grow on trees?
I know, right? It's baffling.
They don't just come from storks? Are you sure?
They grow they appear under the Cabbage Patch, Annie.
Pixar says that you get your e-readers from a little robot in space.
So I think that it was just an interesting response from other readers that were interested enough to log in and respond about the impact, because the article came at this is such a thing. I didn't think about how much it costs to manufacture these, and you have to read so many books or whatever.
Yeah.
But the respondents were I mean, yeah, but you're not thinking about all of the books that are manufactured that aren't sold, that are then the cost to destroy.
Yeah.
or to recycle. You're not thinking about the cost to drive to the bookstore, the library. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that's not really accounted for. That the numbers, the study, it's an interesting mental exercise.
Sure.
But, like, I think that I don't think we're there 100% as far as, like, having a zero, like, green footprint or whatever. But, like, yeah, you're definitely moving in the right direction for a more sustainable way to consume content. And we just need to keep doing that.
And I think that that's, like, also important. We talked about how we, as a rule, don't, like, rely on digital content to always be there. We want to buy physical copies. And I think that this actually helps that, because we're only buying the physical copies that we are going to be keeping. Like. We aren't just, like, buying them and then recycling them. We are buying it for life, basically, which is what we want from sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the fact that we do that is an argument for libraries and against publishers' arguments against, like, lending improvements for e-read. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, e-readers are good.
That's all I had to say about that. It was just a funny article. I was like, the way that the author framed this, I was just like, who thought that this?
Yeah,
like,
and we don't. We're shitting a little bit on Kara here, but it was just very funny to me the way that this was presented, and I think you had the same thought. The way this was presented versus what the actual information was, which was not that dire.
So many books,
several. Like, oh no.
If you keep,
I think I've read 36
e-reader for
this year.
3 or 4 years again, and
I mean, not even. Well, okay. I'm bragging a little bit here, but, like, I definitely read more than 36 books a year.
Yes.
So,
no, I agree. But, like,
Hold on. Let's do some math really quickly. So we said one time, I don't remember what we were researching, but we researched and found that the average person reads 7 books a year. Mm-hmm. So if we say, calculator.
It'd be about 5 years. They need to keep their e-reader.
5.15. So about 5 years is what you said, which is accurate. And now if we say that, like, you know, we go the other direction and find that, like, on that, like, lower end of average was about 3 books a year. So 36 divided by is 12 years. So, yeah. So if you're not reading a ton, maybe don't buy an e-reader. I'm comfortable saying that. But if you are reading on average or above average, buy an e-reader.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I mean, and separately from that, even then, again, like, we're coming back to stuff that wasn't included in this particular article, which is, this is specifically for consumer energy standards,
right?
As
absolutely,
opposed to industry.
Yeah. There's no perfect, like, there's no perfect study on this. Sure. I do appreciate that these, like, rudimentary numbers exist. I hope we get more on this. Actually,
I think that you're right. I think it's a discussion that needs to have started.
Absolutely,
we have, like, ways to go, and I super recommend, if you do think that you'll read 30 books in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Just get them.
They're really nice. I just like having one that fits in my purse and I can take a book everywhere.
Exactly. And as somebody that also, like, prefers actual hard copies, like, at the beach and shit, like, you can get that still. Like, again, the library exists.
Moving on. Kaylee, do you want to intro this to us? What's going on at Barnes & Noble?
Oh, that was so interesting. So, Barnes & Noble is not going to be purchasing as many hardback new books. There's a lot of discussion about this as both a business model, but also as it may impact independent or new authors, which reading through this is like, yeah, it's going to do that. And they're like, no, it's going to be fine. I'm like, no, you just don't want to acknowledge the fact that it's going to impact these authors. It's a very interesting look at how people stick their fingers in their ears kind of deal and be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But so Barnes & Noble will be, again, it's deprioritizing the purchase of hardbacks for new books, especially for
middle grade and YA.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Where a lot of, like, new authors get their kind of jump start. And this is an article from Publishers Weekly by Jim Milliot. But yeah, so he's just discussing the choice here. So from James Daunt, who is actually originally from the UK publishing world, he's going to be focusing more on, I guess, the backlog paperbacks, and then the big name hardbacks get a couple of those in the store, but mostly leave that up to, like people and consumers to order.
And he's the new CEO.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, like, it's, I don't know that I feel bad because this is a fairly good article and it's long and in depth, but like, I feel like we've kind of summarized.
There's not a lot there. There's a lot of hand wringing, and in a related article, I sent this one to you from Publishers Weekly as well, about how Amazon has been ordering fewer books from publishers for its fulfillment warehouses, which means that books are selling a little bit less into warehouses and into Barnes & Noble at the same time. as Kaylee said, like, these are all, like, really long and in-depth articles going into it, but the truth is that all we know right now is that Barnes & Noble and Amazon are deprioritizing physical books at the moment. A lot of different types of physical books for a lot of different reasons, but the truth is that this had been happening a lot before the pandemic, and then the pandemic really ramped up the physical book market, and now it's happening again, and people are wondering if this is a sign of the death of books in general, if this is a sign of the death of the independent market, because this is mostly going to be affecting smaller and mid-sized publishers and smaller and newer authors, which always seems to be the case. You know, your average Stephen King book's going to be just fine. It's going to get as many orders as exist. It's going to be in the grocery stores and at your Costco. Like, it's going to be fine.
Brandon Sanderson's going to be fine.
Right, but then your smaller authors that are maybe dealing with a debut may not get as much attention, and are we then going to be missing out on these great authors? Obviously, we can't predict the future, so we don't know, but that is the worry from a lot of industry observers.
No, I think it's a concern. I think it's a concern specifically for the second concern. I just want to come back. Books are not going anywhere.
I don't think books are going anywhere either.
Physical books are not going anywhere, at least not for a long time. Across the board, just in general, we're not there yet. Like, if you could figure out how a way to beam information directly into my head, then that technology might take the place of actual books.
Right.
Setting that aside, physical books are not going anywhere because and we've already seen this, and I'm not going to get into it too much, but like digital copy, digital content is so much easier to be taken away. So anyway.
There are a lot of downsides to digital content, which is what this news seems to be saying, that Barnes & Noble and Amazon are going to be prioritizing digital content more. This isn't exactly what it's saying, but this seems to be like the direction they're going. But we've talked about this a lot, that digital content, if you get a book on your Kindle or your Nook or your computer or your phone, wherever you got that book from, Amazon or Nook or Google Play or Apple Book, they can just take that away from you. If they decide that book shouldn't be there, they can just take it away from you. And there have been cases of that happening. And so when Kaylee and I have kind of agreed that when we find a book that we really, really love, we always buy a hardcover version. And always buy a physical copy.
And if it's an author you don't like or you don't want to support, you go to the secondhand store and do your best.
Right, exactly. So we're agreeing here. I don't think that physical books are going to go anywhere because there are too many downsides to digital. But yeah, this absolutely could hurt at least.
And I don't think it'll.
But we don't know if it will. We don't. Maybe it'll be fine. Like maybe a smaller selection of the middle grade and YA books will give higher sales and therefore more support to those authors or those author brands or those imprints to have more power in the future. We don't know. We just don't know.
Maybe it'll just change the nature of the publishing industry, and we won't get these really expensive dust jacket.
Right. Maybe we'll get like
it'll just be straight up
paperbacks.
That'll be more accessible.
Who knows? We don't know. Okay, now moving into our favorite news section.
Oh yeah.
Celebrating marginalized peoples in publishing. Kaylee, had you heard of Lambda Literary before I sent this to you?
I had not, to be honest. I really hadn't, which was unfortunate.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about what's going on?
So, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. Again, apologies if I've mispronounced it. But Samaya Basher was named the Lambda Literary Executive Director. She has taken over for another lady who I'm only slightly more confident in. So, Cleopatra Jacques Akaye and Maxwell Scales Sump, and they were co-executive directors as of January. So that's cool. Can you tell me more about the Lambda Literary, Annie?
So Lambda Literary is actually one of my favorite book nonprofits. So they have, since the 90s, honored LGBTQ books widely released in the market, and I'm gonna make a bookshop list of their ones from 2021, and I don't think they've released their long list for 2022, so I'll just do 2021, so you'll be able to see some of their stuff. They have long and wonderful history of supporting LGBTQ writers and books and subject matter, so this is one of those things that's really awesome, and I'm really, really glad that they chose a woman to head up their latest run. It's awesome.
That's pretty cool. She seems really cool. Like the fact that she's formerly of a university in their creative writing program and has got a lot of poetry collections under her belt. Like that's pretty cool. Good for her.
Keep on sparkling.
Yeah, that's right.
And now for our favorite non-news section. Kaylee, what are you reading?
So this supports our next segment that we'll be publishing later. But I'm actually in the middle of illustrated novella, Stardust. Like I said,
I think we called it the comic version last time we talked.
It's a comic, but it's not really a comic.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's to be fair, like there is certainly like Clive Barker did a similar thing, not as such. Like his book was a lot longer, but Abarat, the version that I purchased was illustrated as well, and I thought it was really cool, and I love it. Like I absolutely adore when you get like more engagement with what the creator initially actually was trying to show you.
Absolutely,
I think that's just so cool. It's a very different experience. Like there's nothing wrong with theater of the mind. Books are frequently more engaging than their adaptations because of the descriptive nature of the literature. But there is just something very special when something is written in a way that includes that flexibility, but also gives you like a chance to really understand the vibe that the author was going for. Super cool. What about you, Annie? What are you reading?
I am still reading Last Book on the Left. Brandon, you lent it to me like 2 months ago, and I'm gonna get it back to you, I swear. But it's really good. I just finished the chapter on Richard Ramirez, who is one of the most evil serial killers probably of all time. Do you know who Richard Ramirez is?
No.
Do you have the spoons to hear about a serial killer? Right
yeah.
now? Okay. Richard Ramirez was just evil. He just did it because he liked how it felt. I mean, he also had issues in his life, but he had the misfortune of also growing up in a family that was extremely violent and taught him to be violent. And then hanging out with people in his life who were Vietnam vets who had, been traumatized by Vietnam and showed him how to commit atrocities, and then by people who showed him how to steal things and sneak into people's houses. So I did know, actually. I do know about him. So they're like this. It's like the perfect training ground storm for this man. He was the Night Stalker, the one who ascended to the throne of the Night Stalker after the original Night Stalker kind of turned into the East Area Rapist. Was one of those who took metal songs very seriously, and speaking of the Satanic Verses, took the Satanic Verses literally. And this is in the 80s, so like Satanic Panic, it was him, Richard Ramirez. Obviously, again, like these guys are comedians doing this, so they're making fun of this asshole. Also with illustrations of him like trying to join the X-Men, being like, I have this particular set of skills, and then being like, what? No, go away, you're the worst. And they're very unflattering to him, which, as they should be.
I was gonna say, don't give these men power.
Absolutely
Making fun of
not,
them is literally the only thing that we should do.
100%. I firmly believe in Taika Waititi's stance that making fun of Hitler is the best way to talk about Hitler.
Yep.
So yeah,
you have to talk about Hitler. That's the only way to do it.
So yeah, and it was a big meaty chapter on him, and I again felt that. So I want to say I did do some research on why true crime makes you feel better. There is scholarly research out there.
Was I right?
You were in fact correct.
Perfect.
It's the same sort of thing as a murder mystery situation, but also validating your anxiety and then showing you how to avoid said issue. So I was able to access many of these from Digital Commons licenses and JSTOR. So shout out to my local library for giving me access to JSTOR. The Allure and Effects of the True Crime Genre by Geraldine Jones. Her honors capstone in 2021 for her honors minor in media arts. Congrats, Geraldine. It was great. And Geraldine showed how the history of this is it's actually very, very long. People have been obsessed with true crime novels, true crime magazines, true crime songs, and then, of course, the podcast and movie and documentary booms. This one goes specifically into Mindhunter and Criminal Minds, which I thought was a fascinating angle to take. And I really felt like they kind of nailed it when they said, people will always be drawn to true crime and the idea that they can find ways to protect themselves by seeing what the victims did wrong. And that's in quotes because obviously none of those victims did anything wrong. They're victims, but there's a I don't know, almost a scientific detachment that can come when you're watching true crime, and that's what they're referring to here. This gives the viewer a sense of security that if they were to be in this type of situation, they may be able to escape. It also offers answers to the question we start asking from the moment we speak. Why? As people, we are always looking for an explanation to the world around us, and these films, series, and books offer answers as to why people commit crimes, something we usually cannot understand. You were 100% right, Kaylee. I am jealous that you just had that off the top of your head. But it was super interesting. There's also, of course, a lot of discourse in this we can't just gloss over because I did the research, so I have to talk about how there are unfortunate amounts in true crime of minimizing what the victims went through and venerating these people.
Yeah, you have to be so conscientious about how you approach.
Absolutely, yeah. And as we said, like the book that I'm reading is making fun of these serial killers because sometimes comedy is the only way that you can minimize evil. And in that case, it is absolutely just to do so and making sure that you are honoring the victims. When I talk about Richard Ramirez, I am not saying that he was in any way any good adjective ever. He was a problem, and we can talk about his psychosis and his schizophrenia, but the truth is that people with psychosis and schizophrenia aren't all murderers.
In fact, most of them aren't. They just
I would say almost all of them aren't. It's just like those one or two people who make it a problem. So
and in the world, we like to find things that other people to make sure to make ourselves feel better.
Mm-hmm. So, well done, Kaylee, for just knowing that shit off the top of your head. Otherwise, I'm gonna finish that.
Community college psychology class is really coming into play.
It is great. Do you have a Kaylee Coda for us for this episode, Kaylee?
Yes, I do. To all those girlies out there who read too much, fuck those people. Enjoy your books and your magazines and your essays and your novellas. Go on Kindle Unlimited if you need to. Go on any Lit Hub, Lit Sci. Go to your library. Take out 50 books at a time, however many they let you take out. And then aggressively read them, spitefully read them, whatever makes you feel good. Like, seriously, the whole concept of media consumption, knowledge consumption being a bad thing is trash. Godspeed. And anybody who tells you otherwise isn't worth your time.
Thanks for listening. I am Annie.
I'm Kaylee.
You can find The Ink Sink on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Anchor and Spotify with availability for sponsorships. You can sponsor us for as low as $1 a month. That would be really nice. Also, thank you, Abby.
Thanks, Abby.
You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. If you would like to hear or see any of the books that we have talked about ever, we have them all on bookshop.org, so you can support your local bookshop. Please do. And support your libraries.
Have a good one.